the Merry Monk Inn. This was quite a favourable arrangement, according to Rachel, who had spent a number of her own merry lunchtimes in the old beer house with some of her library colleagues. It was Saturday morning, and we were having a quick breakfast at Fogg's Cafe, a bit further up the road. It was a bit of a greasy spoon affair, but they made wonderful cakes and pastries, and I still hadn't satisfied my cake craving after watching an episode of The Bake Off the other evening. While tucking into a gloriously sticky Danish pastry, I noticed that Rachel seemed distracted. She was looking at an old map of the town on the wall next to us, and paying little attention to her own Danish pastry, which had a larger cherry on the top than mine. "Rach," I asked, "are you going to eat that?" She completely ignored my question, and instead asked one of her own. "Mum, have you noticed that there are a lot of fogs in this town? The place is full of them." "Fog?" I answered, bewildered. "You mean like mist?" "No," she answered, a little irritated. "Fogs. Fog with 2 G's. The family. We're in Fogg's Cafe, and further down the road there's a Fogg and Sons butcher's, and I'm pretty sure we passed a chemist with the name G. Fogg." Honestly, Rachel, I hadn't noticed, but now you point it out, yes, you're right. "But then you do know the town a lot better than I do," I said, taking another bite of my Danish pastry. "Also," she continued, "wasn't the old man with the dog in the cemetery yesterday?" "Stanley," I interjected, with a mouthful of pastry. "Yes, Stanley. He's a Fogg too, isn't he?" she asked. "Well, yes, at least presumably," I said. "He told me his great-grandfather had lived at the old hall during the time Elizabeth Pike was murdered, and his name was Fogg. As was his mother, the housekeeper, of course, who found Elizabeth's dead body." Rachel paused, and there was a mention of another couple of Foggs in one of the old newspaper clippings. "Was there?" I asked, trying to remember. Rachel reached into her shopping bag and pulled out the old brown envelope that the stranger had given us. She took out the newspaper clippings from the packet and found the one in question. "Yes," she said, scanning the print with her index finger. "Mr. and Mrs. Elijah Fogg. They provided the food for the engagement ball, and they were landlords at the Merry Monk Inn too." I nodded. "But I suppose there are lots of family names that still linger about in all small British towns. It's not that unusual." She said. "I wonder if the family still run the pub." I shrugged and took a last bite of my pastry. Rachel shuffled through the newspaper clippings. "Anyway, would you like me to read another of these newspaper reports before we go into the library?" she asked. "Okay," I said, taking a sip of my cappuccino. "Let's look at Elizabeth Pike's funeral," said Rachel, "if that's not too morbid a subject on a sunny Saturday morning." "Well, it's all pretty morbid, Rachel," I laughed. "And don't let that pastry go to waste," I added. She rolled her eyes at me, smiled, and took a large, deliberate bite of the Danish. Wiping her mouth and hands on the paper napkin beside her, she began. "So this is from the Monk's Ferry Journal, the Saturday edition from the 4th of November, 1872. It reads, 'Murder at Monk's Ferry. Funeral of Miss Elizabeth Pike.' The funeral of Miss Elizabeth chaplain, butler, Mrs. Fogg, housekeeper, and various footmen and maids. The Mayor of Monk's Ferry, who had attended Miss Pike's engagement ball with his wife last month, was not in attendance, since Mrs. Bertram had been struck down once again by a sudden and mysterious illness. As already reported, the service was conducted by the deceased's former fiancé, the Reverend Charles Griffin, who began by addressing the mourners there in attendance and beseeched them to recognise the special solemnity of the occasion, that death under favoured circumstances was painful, but that the occasion of this death was intensely so. The reverend gentleman then offered a reading from 1 Corinthians 15, taken from the 19th verse. After this, the reverend spoke of his own personal sorrow, and the moment of intense sin which had cruelly snatched from his reach, and those of the mourners there present, a future wife, sister, and friend. As the reverend began to pray for those present to be comforted, a commotion was heard at the back of the church, and an unknown woman was seen shouting and flaying her arms about in a wild and dramatic manner. 2 policemen from the Monk's Ferry Constabulary, who were in attendance at the entrance to the church, were seen to restrain the woman and remove her quickly from the scene. Her identity is unknown. Apart from this strange incident, the service was a deeply affecting one, and the spectators outside the church, who were now many in number, despite the heavy rain, were most orderly. "The paper is ripped at the bottom," said Rachel as she finished reading, "so it ends a bit abruptly." "It's all very sad, Rach," I said, "but who was the woman flaying her arms about at the end? What on earth do you suppose that was all about?" "I suppose we may never know," answered Rachel, taking another large bite of pastry. Then she paused and looked down at the newspaper clipping in her hand. "But we have to try and find out more, Mum. I don't know what this compulsion is within me to want to know more. I just know it's there." We finished our coffees and wandered down the road to the imposing mid-Victorian building which housed the library and archives of Monk's Ferry. A date over the doorway, carved in pale stone, read, "Free Library, 1865. Once inside, Rachel directed me across the decorative Minton-tiled floor, up the grand central staircase with its elaborately carved handrails, and right up a second flight of stairs towards a large set of double doors with large brass handles. "What a beautiful place," I said, glancing at Rachel as she pulled open one of the heavy doors and motioned me inside. Rachel smiled and pointed over to the far end of the large room with its huge sash windows, great oak tables and bookcases. "There's Sue," she said. Sue waved back. She was a petite woman in her late 40s, at least that was my guess. She wore her long black hair in chunky braids, and as she approached I could see that she also had a little pair of silver glasses on the end of her nose. "Hey, Rach, I'm surprised to see you here on your day off," she exclaimed. Rachel smiled. "We've come to check something out. Sue, this is Mum. Mum, this is Sue." I said hello and went to shake Sue's hand, realising a bit too late that both of her arms were fully encumbered with books. "Let me put these down," she said, placing the books carefully on one of the oak tables nearby. "Lovely to meet you," she said. "Rachel tells me you've just moved to the area. How can I help?" "Oh, well, we were looking for a painting actually, rather than a book. I was told there was a large one of a young woman. Her name was Elizabeth Pike, In the reading room somewhere, and another one of her father, I answered, looking around expectantly at the wood-panelled walls. Rachel cut across me. I was a bit confused though, Sue, when Mum told me, because I don't recall seeing any paintings like that in this room, or anywhere else in the library, come to that. Ah, yes, they do exist, but they were taken down in the 1970s, I believe, said Sue. Actually, we do have a number of large paintings of the founder and benefactors of the library down in the stores. The founder? I asked. Yes, Alpheus Pike founded the library in 1865. You might have seen the date carved above the front door as you came in. Ah, which is why their portraits are here, said Rachel. I had no idea that the Pike family were connected with the library, but of course it makes sense. Mum and I are trying to find out more about them. Can we go down to the stores, Sue? Yes, of course, said Sue. Give me a minute, and I'll get the collections register. The library's stores were in the basement of the old building. Down 2 flights of stone steps, another large heavy wooden door opened into a narrow dark room lined on both sides with modern metal shelving. Paintings of all shapes and sizes, both framed and unframed, were stacked horizontally along the shelving. Sue turned on the fluorescent tube lighting and began cross-checking the handwritten shelf labels with the large inventory register in her hands. She stopped at the end of the room and motioned us to join her. So here is Alpheus Pike, she said, handing Rachel the large book and pulling out the horizontal metal shelf to its full length with a tug. A large gilt-framed oil painting of a middle-aged bearded man sitting at a wooden desk in a dimly lit wood-panelled room appeared before us. He was formally dressed in a dark frock coat, and next to him a large wolfhound rested its head on his right knee. He has kind eyes, said Rachel. The dog or the man, I quipped. Rachel rolled her eyes at me and took out her mobile phone. Sue, can I take a photograph of this? Yes, no problem, answered Sue. Would you like to see the painting of his daughter? Absolutely, I said. Rachel suddenly chipped in excitedly. Mum, that's our grandfather clock. She was pointing to a tall clock leaning against the wooden panelling to the left of Alpheus Pike. No, I exclaimed. Really? Are you sure? Yes, definitely. I'd recognise that monstrosity anywhere, she exclaimed. I leaned forward to take a closer look. She was right. There was the same clock that was currently sitting in the hallway of our house. How extraordinary, I said. Sue, how old is this painting? Do you know? She took back the register from Rachel and scanned the entries with her finger. It says here 1868. Not sure we know who the artist was. The notes say that it was painted some months before his death. So the room that he's sitting in is probably somewhere in the old hall, said Rachel. Perhaps, said Sue, although it could have been anywhere really. The offices of Pike and Bell Shipping, maybe, which was situated a bit further up the river in Myrtleton. Pike and Bell Shipping, I asked. Yes, it's how Alpheus Pike made his fortune. I suppose they would have called it new money back then. I believe he was pretty broke when he came across to Monk's Ferry from Dublin in the 1830s, said Sue. I got the impression the Pikes were one of those ancient families, you know, part of the old nobility, said Rachel, surprised. I think one of the old newspaper clippings we have talks about them having a family crest or something. Yeah, said Sue. Probably a made-up crest, though. seen in its reflection. "It's you!" I exclaimed, looking at Rachel. Rachel was staring intently at the figure in the painting, with her mouth slightly open in astonishment. "We even have the same hair colour," she murmured. Sue looked a little dumbfounded too. "I haven't looked at this painting in a long, long time," she said. "But yes, she does look like you, Rachel. How bizarre." "Okay, this is a little creepy," said Rachel, with a nervous laugh. "What does she have in her hand?" I asked, gazing back at the painting. Sue looked a little closer. "Well, she has her left hand on her hip, so you can't see it very well, but in her right she's holding a silk scarf and some keys." "5 keys," said Rachel bluntly, "on a brass ring." Then looking at me, said, "Hell, Mum, that can't be the same scarf that they found around her neck," I finished. "They found around her neck," exclaimed Sue, scrunching her eyes up and moving closer to the painting. "What do you mean?" Rachel stepped back from the picture. "It can't be. We're overthinking this because we're a little weirded out right now. But one of the newspaper reports of her murder states that she was strangled with a silk scarf." "Well, I read that she died in suspicious circumstances," said Sue, "but the book doesn't go into that much detail." "The book?" said Rachel and I in unison. Yeah," said Sue, a little bemused by our joint eagerness. "The history of the old hall. It's one of a volume of 10 from a history of Monk's Ferry. 19th century, I think.